Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Snowpiercer. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Or first and foremost, you could definitely tell, like, the whole thing in the beginning I thought was kind of interesting with the whole Andre and Zara. Obviously, Zara's really loving that, like, that. It's like, oh yeah, like, they get this little sweet dig. Obviously, Andre kind of had the biggest reservation because it's like, yeah, you might not want to be working anywhere near where the tail is, because the tail still looks at you as kind of a traitor against him, so it's like kind of working second. She's like, okay, but she's kind of like, it's kind of living it up even best, being like, oh, you actually have a home. Consider everyone's lives were turned upside down because of this revolution. It seems like Zara is the only one who's kind of come up. Everyone else is still just kind of in the middle, figuring out where the hell do we stand. There's no more class systems. There's no more first, second, third, or tail. It's just we're all one train, right? So beyond that, it's like, where does everyone stand? Where does she in particular stand? Because she was part of this revolution, but she's not a brakeman anymore. So it's like, even she's kind of lost her place on the train. So she's a little snippy, not a little, kind of like a little sarcastic and snide when it comes to Zara, and Zara can kind of, pick up on that. Which, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the Zara side of things. That was so interesting when it's revealed, like, Josie's still alive. I was like, whoa! I wasn't expecting. I was like, now that's interesting. For them to do that. I was like, that's fascinating. So, making that be the case, I'm like, whoa. And at first she was like, the dude was like, oh, do you know who she is? And she was like, no. I'm like, why are you lying about not knowing Josie? But then I started thinking about it, I was like, oh, right. Because if Josie comes back, she's going to take away Andre's attention. Because, like, now Zara has Andre back. She has everything. I'm living a better life. I've got Andre. I've got a baby. Like, everything's coming up Zara. But if Josie coming back in, that's going to be another thing that takes away Andre's attention. He'll be more focused on her. And she feels like maybe I'll lose a little bit. Because I think for her, it's more so like not just about the baby and the life. It's about having Andre in her life too. Because also having him on her side means she's protected as well. It's not only like, it's kind of like, I think she's worried that like if she doesn't have Andre, then the rest won't matter as much. It's like, it's having Andre there to protect her. It's like he's head honcho of the train to a certain degree. So it's like his word has a little weight behind it. So it's like, if he's looking out for you, then, everything's a little honky dory. But if he's so focused on Josie, she kind of becomes a hindrance to the point she was like, I'm sorry, Josie, and tries to kill her. Luckily, she decided not to do the horrible thing and ended up, second guessing herself and be like, no, I can't do it. But having that conversation with Audrey, because Audrey's coming at it from a perspective, it's like, what if you have to protect something? And it's like, well, what are you talking about? Are you talking about yourself? Are you talking about the baby? Are you talking about Andre? She's like, all three. It's like, what you need to protect is Andre. He's literally the glue holding this all together. So protecting him is kind of what comes first and foremost. Do whatever you got to kind of, like, I guess, make that happen. And so she knows that Andre, like, having Josie by his side, she would give him strength, because for her, it's like, Josie, you're always the one people go to about doing the right thing. But she was like, leans into Josie and be like, stay out of my way. It's like, all right, you can take Andre, but everything else is going to be mine. I'm not going to let you take this life. This new path that she says. It's like, it's sad because obviously she ended up selling everyone out to kind of benefit herself beforehand. So it's almost like to be fair, that's what everyone on Snowpiercer is doing. They're trying to live their best life. Everyone, once you had the taste of the sweet life, no way in hell you're going to give that up. That's kind of where things stood beforehand. But now it's like, once you get a little taste of that power, that privilege, that no longer just being behind it in the tail, a place of darkness and death. Then it's like, once you've been shown the light, there's no going back, So it's going to be interesting to see what that turnaround becomes. I'm curious, did Josie hear what she said? That's going to definitely be a point of contention between them going forward. I mean, granted, we don't know the full circumstances of Josie's situation after everything. What that necessarily entails. It's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, she's going to have to be filled in about everything that's going down subsequently since. So there's that side of things. Then you also have, like, obviously there was someone from the tail that got attacked. We find out later on it was Lights. And now Bess has been put in charge. She's the new train detective, which I love. She was like, wait, what? Because he's like, all right, Roach, let's do it. He's like, what now? All right, put your hand up, dude. All right, you got the job. And she's like, what? I don't want it. It's like, he's like, well, you got the promotion. It's like, for her, she's kind of not even sure what her situation is, but it's like, Andre trusts her to handle this. And Roach is like, yeah, it was a beautiful ceremony. Congratulations. So, I think for her, she even said it herself, like she was like, yeah, she's still kind of shaky herself because of, like she's kind of tired, like all the blood that was spilled, like even more being spilled, she's kind of over. But at least being the trained detective, maybe she can kind of help bridge the gap a lot and kind of keep peace and find a way to kind of unite the train, as Andre's trying to do the same thing. As each one kind of coming at it from their own situation. But now it's as Bess is investigating, to Light's situation, because Light was kind of like, it's like now that her hands been like, she was attacked, she did see her attack her. She was saying it might have been with an axe, but it's like because her hand is messed up, she can't work anymore. She's just like, I want to go back to the tail because I don't have a place up here. It's like, regardless of the circumstances, they're even more out of place than they were before. And so now it's just like, it's kind of like, okay, so maybe it's just, someone attacking her because she's a telly and the current circumstances. But she goes and meets with the father, Logan, and he kind of talks about how basically insinuating, like, Wilford was essentially kind of like the head honcho, a god to be worshipped, because everyone's like, oh, he's our savior, he's the one behind it. So many people, obviously Melanie kept the lie up for so long, so many people kept in believing in the legend, the greatness. It's actually sad because inadvertently Melanie keeping Wilford alive actually probably kind of made things worse for her in the long run, because it was all for keeping peace and keeping the train going to a certain extent. But because of that, like, she helped build up the legend that is Wilford, and that hope was taken from people, but now they have it back because it's like, oh my God, Wilford, like, it kept him alive in their hearts for 7 years, and that belief in following him, even though it turned out to be a lie, now it's like, oh, we get to follow the real thing. He's alive. He's returned to us. Even seeing his return is a bit of a miracle on some like Jesus level shit. So now you have Bess kind of thinking it was someone in support of Wilford that did it. That obviously is like, Wilford he's here with us. Like, he's already infiltrated the train. By him coming back, there are already people that are swayed. Obviously, we see it with Ruth. I was blanking on her name for a second. Because we see how, like, when she gets the letter later on, she's like, oh my God, yeah, it's from Wilford. And she smells it, and you have Andre being like, Ruth, get to reading the letter. What is wrong with you? So that was kind of interesting. Especially because at the end, she sees Wilford does the 3-finger thing, which I guess, like, 3 fingers each for one of the first, second, and third class. But being on the one train, but seeing that, and then she goes and looks at Light's hand, and her thumb and her pinky are missing, only holding up her 3 fingers. So it's definitely true that, like, obviously this train's already in a little bit of an upheaval because of this. Because even Bess had said at the beginning, like, half the train is scared that Wilford's going to kill them, and the other half is like thinking that he's going to save them from you. And Andre was like, it's kind of a little bit of both. I guess for most people, I mean, in general, he's like, I guess it's a little bit of both. So that's definitely going to be interesting to find out who. I like that, though, because I'm glad that they are bringing that element back, because I would think, considering the circumstances, we wouldn't have that murder mystery. I mean, granted, it's not a murder mystery. I mean, it feeds into the overarching story, because there's probably a small group that's probably building more and more a secret sect of people aboard Snowpiercer that are about, like, yeah, let's back up Mr. Wilford. Anyone that's not on board with that can get it, I mean, because there's going to be the people who worship him, and then once again, there's going to be the people who just straight up fear him as well. So I'm sure that's all going to play a part in, like, us getting like another revolution, because the war starting once again is going to be another civil war, but it's kind of like a Hydra and Shield situation. Hydra hidden beneath Shield. I know I didn't have to make a Marvel reference. Once again, wasn't even thinking about when it crossed my mind, because I was like, right, because Jennifer Connelly is in the MCU. Granted, I hope we get more of her in the MCU. Once again, if you're unaware, she voices Peter's AI system. I think she's only in Homecoming. Karen, his AI system from his suit. That was Jennifer Connelly, which I was like, oh my God, that's so dope. Especially like when I rewatched it, I was like, Jennifer Connelly. I think I knew that at the time when I rewatched it. Regardless, I'm going on a tangent. Interesting timing too, because I just thought about that. Because she's married to Paul Bettany, who obviously WandaVision's going on right now, a Marvel property. So I just thought I'm thinking about it too much. I just thought it was interesting timing and stuff like that. Everything kind of overlapping in that regard. Once again, thank you too much. Regardless, getting back to the point I was trying to make earlier. Right. The whole point I was making was I'm glad that they're bringing back a little bit of that investigation aspect to it. I like the whole train detective situation. So a little bit of a mystery still mixed in there, but I'm sure it's going to be even more of a crucial point to be fair, the murders played their own part in the revolutions and just kind of Melanie trying to keep balance while still dealing with the murders. And obviously it played its own part this season as well, I'm sure. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how it ends up ultimately playing out. But Andre and Roach are sitting down with Kevin, and it's like, oh, we know where you're from and everything. Tell us about Mr. Wilford and Big Alice. He's not talking, but it's like, oh, look at these wings. He's like, are those? Oh yeah, real chicken, spices and everything. And he goes to town on. I'm like, wow, you really about to confess over some wings? But then later on, it makes sense because they don't have the food resources and supplies that the Snowpiercer does, because Snowpiercer has all the liquidities that Big Alice sadly is shortcoming. They even reference Bob. It's like, how was he able to fight the cold? Basically, it's like I forgot what he said specifically. It was almost like it was like synthesized skin or something. Like that, basically he was modified to be like that, which is kind of effed up. But I guess considering their circumstances, because God. What's his face? Wilford, God, had said that his people are more used to the code because they haven't had the commodities that Snowpiercer has, so they kind of had a struggle in meeting code. So I'm assuming that maybe it's before the build, probably during the process of figuring out the Big Alice situation in that time frame after Snowpiercer was taken, that is like, we need someone to make a sacrifice for us. So he became the cold immune behemoth just to so they can have someone to survive and I guess fix and do things when necessary. I guess they were also planning for, this takeover whenever it would eventually happen. So maybe that's, maybe it takes part, maybe that was part of the consideration for everything. But Kevin kind of breaks down and admits hey, there's there's 100 people there, and it kind of all right, solidified some stuff for them without him really realizing it. So then you have the whole conversation between Melanie and Wilford about it's him planning to get his train back. All he has to deal with is Andre. And it's she was basically don't underestimate Andre, because she was she made that mistake, and see how things kind of ended up. So he decides he wants a prisoner exchange. He will give them Melanie in exchange for Kevin. So they set that whole deal up because it's a good opportunity to get Melanie back, especially now it gives him an opportunity to see what his whole deal is. He's most likely, you're going to use it as an opportunity to see what we got going on as well. So they have the two head honchos had to talk across the barrier, and they make their exchange. And so when it's all said and done, Kevin's, he's Mr. Wilford's oh, here's his bathroom. Okay, what's up with this? I was expecting him to snap his neck, stab him. I didn't know what to really expect. I was you're about to kill him. Because it's okay, especially when they're so did they feed you? He was what? I didn't tell them anything. And it's yeah, I was a little hungry, so they gave me a bit of food, but it's that's the problem. You showed weakness. You showed them in that moment that how desperate you were to eat shows that you showed them weakness. You showed that we are kind of starving. So it kind of did what Andre wanted it to. It showed okay, you showed one of our vulnerabilities. You kind of exposed us. You kind of put us in danger. Because of that, it's a thing of he has to kill himself, but the fact is, it seems I doubt Kevin's the first person, but I guess it's kind of just like Snowpiercer has its harsh rules, so does Big Alice. So it's kind of the deal. It's but who's going to take care of Kevin was who's in charge of hospitality going to be, and he's oh, you don't have to worry about that. You can just let go. It's everything's going to be fine. And slits his wrist or vein or whatever. And to me, I was confused the entire time because I'm you're in a bath with him, which looks even more disturbing. And what's interesting is obviously another more proof that this isn't the first time this happened. Alex knows the whole protocol of like, give us the room. She goes in there, closes herself off, puts her headphones in and everything. So this isn't the first time. So it's like, it's so interesting that she still looks at him like the way she does, but it's like when she had no one, she had him. So it makes sense. So especially having him around, probably vilifying your mom the entire time. Granted, you were probably able to do that all on your own, but you kind of feel bad for Kevin. But also it's just like, oh, he's bathing in the literal bloodbath water. It's a literal bloodbath, and your dog is licking it up. It's just like, oh, this is twisted. Why are you sitting in a bath with him? It's almost like you're just like reveling in it, just like, because it's in a way, interestingly enough, because I was about to make reference to American Gods, because I'm blanking on the actress's name. I'm so bummed. It's the actress. She's one of the scientists on Big Alice. She plays Mama G in American Gods, but Agent Christopher in Timeless is another thing I know her from. And so I believe that's her. I could be mistaken, but that looked and it sounded like it was her. I could have been mistaken. I didn't realize that last episode until I was looking at this episode. I was like, isn't that her? I should have checked the credits before I started my recording, but regardless, tangents and all that. It just made me think, because like, oh yeah, like gods, and they need their sacrifice, and lo and behold, what is he doing? He's just reveling in like, you made your sacrifice. I mean, like, it's kind of getting off on it like a little bit, just being like, oh, you're willing to die, you're willing to sacrifice your life because you know you're wrong, and I'm the head honcho, I'm the god who runs this place. So when I tell you to do something, you break the rules. You know you have to pay tribute to me. You have to. So there's a little bit of a parallel there, I think, which is kind of interesting. But you know. Melanie also tells she tells first Ben and Javi about what she discovered, and it's like what was in the snow, which is interesting because she initially told Alex, but Alex didn't believe her and was just like, what? Obviously there's something she wasn't telling. It's like, no, she tried to tell you, you just didn't want to listen to her. You were like, yeah, like I was told how much of a, you know, how you can, it's like they're basically believers in the world, and they're not scammers. Believers are the ones who kind of build up the world. Scammers are the ones who kind of take it for themselves. So kind of insinuating her mom to be a scammer. I was like, hey, your mom tried to tell you the truth, but you didn't really want to listen to her at the time. But now it's a situation of like they're sending like stuff up to examine the atmosphere, because now they're kind of believing like if it's snowing, that means that the atmosphere, like things might be actually getting better if there's actual snow, because it's so cold, there's no like possibility for like real snow. But it turns out upon their analysis, like as it goes higher into the atmosphere, it's showing that it's actually getting warmer. Like it hasn't trickled down to Earth. Earth is still like the frozen ice age wasteland that it is, but it's showing that Earth is coming back from this. The world is kind of being reborn, and this gives them hope. Granted, we don't know how long it's going to take, but you know, later on, Melanie says where originally the timetable was like it'd take 1,000 years for everything to fix. Inadvertently, it might be something that's fixed in our lifetime, which is interesting because you know, just most obviously, the final season of the 100 kind of finished up last year, and so. Without going around it, like there was a similar situation with Earth in that, and actually multiple parts. Because I mean, I guess technically, if I wanted to break it down, like let's not forget there's the whole circumstances of Earth from the very beginning of the series. So I can at least go from there without really going into spoilers. Like it took 100 years for that to happen. You know, it kind of to recover from its apocalyptic situation. So, but now it's like Andre's like, we can use this to our advantage. We can kind of knock Wilford off his game. He'll come into this, you know, wanting, you know, an audience and everything, which Melanie's like, that's kind of the worst thing you can do is give him an audience. But it's like, by doing this, we're going to need them. We're going to need everyone to come together with this, because hope is the most powerful thing. And what is he trying to do? Crush hope. And now if we can use this, we can knock that egotistical bastard like off his game, because he's here to try and crush hope. But we're surmount enough of it. Like even he'll kind of be caught wavering, which he ultimately was. But I love Melanie being like, you're going to have to work. You have to work with Ruth. And you have Andre being like, like, really? I have to really call her Ruth? All right, fine. And so Ruth is writing the letter and she's just smelling it and everything. And you almost have Andre like, all right, come on, hurry up, Ruth. Stop being the weirdo. So obviously it's the meetup. You have Wilford setting up Alex to be the one that kill Andre. It's like, oh, think about it. Your mom took Snowpiercer from me. Andre took Snowpiercer from her, and it's only poetic justice that you be the one to end up taking it. It's like you're stronger than your mom. You're smarter than your mom was at your age. Puffing her up. It's like doing all that because. I was about to say, it's not necessarily Stockholm Syndrome, which, I mean, maybe to some extent, maybe it is, but it is the thing of, like, him pepping her up, like, all the stuff, that, like, he's perpetuating the hate she kind of already has for her mom, because she was like, she's mean, she's confused, and she hates me, which Andre was like, oh, so she's a teenager. But he perpetuates the hate a little bit, and I think he knows that's enough of a trigger to be able to sway her, because it's like, remember, your mom wasn't there for you. I was. And he knows that's the buttons to push to set Alex off, and he knows those are buttons that can also be used to manipulate Melanie as well. So when it's all said and done, he's going through the train, meeting with everyone, which I didn't talk about it. Oz and LJ, they're trying to find an advantage in this situation. So they meet up with the custodians. It's like, hey, we need a job. It's like, we're not going to help you. LJ's like, but I got connections. Like, there's no first class anymore. Yeah, but my family has ties to Wilford. So, hey, it's like, okay, you want to help out? You want a job here? You're going to have to do some actual custodian work. Which we see LJ jump at the opportunity to meet with him again. And he's like, oh, hey, where'd your parents? She's like, they died in the war. And he's like, I understand. Oh, I'm so sorry. And she hugs him. And then there's this look between her and Alex as Alex is walking by. She kind of stares him down. I'm like, that's definitely going to be some storyline beat. I'm curious to see what that is. It might be a situation where it's like Alex might be kind of like, well, Alex is no longer useful to me because we see what he does when people kind of blow his expectations not blow their expectation or below his expectation, or they let him down in some shape or form. Alex might not be an exception, so LJ might be able to worm her way into being quote unquote best girl or something like that in his eyes. So she's without a father, and to him it might be like, oh, you're a better daughter than she is. So because despite everything, Alex has her reservations. LJ, as we know, is a complete and utter psychopath. I think sociopath is, psychopath might go, sociopath, whichever one. Once again, I always forget which one's which. But, that might lean more toward what he needs because, because we know, I'm thinking that's probably going to turn to a storyline because we know she was connected to the killings last season, so she's probably going to be at the top of the list considering she's all buddy-buddy with Wilford, but it's like, nah, she's not connected because I'm sure Oz is like, I'm around her enough to know that, but then it's like, well, we saw she manipulate someone else into doing all the killings last time, so who's to say it's not, it's like, no, it's not me. So it might turn into that, we'll see. But I think Wilford might look at her as a blunt object that's a lot more malleable because she's kind of a bit of a wild animal. So it's kind of like, oh, you might just be something I need at the end of the day. But when the talks went down about like everything that's going down, Melanie's discovery about like, hey, the world might be ours, in our lifetime. But it's like what they're going to have to do is they're going to go to a specific spot. They're going to throw up a whole bunch of sensors, so they can examine everything and find out, get a better analysis. But they're going to have to circle back in a month. To make sure everything's in line, someone's going to have to stay behind. Which at first, he's trying to discount it by being like, well, look at Melanie who's been lying to you for like 7 years. And then there's the rebel who's covered in blood from all the people that's died because of his revolution. It's like, you can't really listen to them. But his scientists are like, actually, there's validity. There is truth to like her hypothesis about this. But he, sways the situation by being like, but that means someone's going to have to stay. And Melanie's like, yes, fine, I'll do it. And it's like, yeah, I guess you're used to leaving things behind. And he goes right next to Alex and telling Alex, like, back down, because he can't have her doing anything like that, especially now, because now it's going to be like, wait, he's going to come off looking like the villain, especially because it's like, hey, Andre and them are presenting us some great information. And you're, especially because they're so full of hope, he'll come off looking like a bad guy. But I'm sure he's going to find a way to switch this around. It's definitely going to be interesting, especially because, Andre was like, you could have told me about this, but she was saying, I forgot what like her reasoning for, she gave a specific reason on why she didn't say anything, but now she's kind of leaving everything in his hand. It's like, come back and get me in a month. And it's like, yeah, so that's definitely going to be interesting. Like having to handle, Wilford, because the person who knows him best is going to be gone. Now I'm wondering, is he going to try and, I was like about to say, do you think he's going to try and leave Alex with her? It's like, I need someone here to monitor you or something. Like, I don't know. I don't see that happening, but we'll see. But at the end, Alex is like, don't tell me this is for my sake. And, Melanie's like, no, it's for all of our sake. Granted, Alex, her mom can do no right under these circumstances. So she's pissed under the circumstances. So a lot of really, really interesting things. I'm curious to ultimately see where all of this is going to take us going forward into the next episode with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.